Sri Radha. So we're talking about Gopala-champu, and I'm trying to set the situation at the very beginning of the book. But in order to set the situation at the very beginning, I have to tell you what happens at the end. But the beginning is very important, because we have this Snigdhakantha and Madhukantha, who are sort of revealed to be Nanda and Manigriva, these two brothers who were saved by the baby Krishna in the Damodara Lila. At any rate, these two disciples of Narada, who have become performers in the Nitya Dham, and they're coming around and performing for Radha and Krishna, and performing for Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda, and recounting Krishna Lila. Now, I believe that even though in the Puranas and the Upanishads, not so much the Upanishads, but especially in the Puranas, for instance in the Bhagavata Purana, and most of the Puranas, you have a story within a story within a story. And usually that story within a story is fairly straightforward. It's not necessarily very important, but you usually have that the Kumaras go to see Narada Muni and they ask him a question, and then Narada Muni says, well, yes, I asked this very same question of Shiva. And then you have and he starts to tell the story of what Shiva told to him. And then you have Shiva saying, yes, I asked the same very question of Brahma. And then he'll tell the story of how Brahma told him. And so you have this conversations within conversations within conversations. And sometimes it seems pretty pointless. Why are they doing it like that? And part of the reason is to show that there's higher authority, that there's a parampara, that the knowledge is descending through from higher authorities, and that even the highest authorities, even the Naradas and the Shivas, are going to ask higher authorities in order to get the highest truth. And I think that's the purpose. In the Bhagavatam, of course, we have stories within the stories. That Jiva Goswami is talking to Shaunaka Rishi and Naimisharanya, and then from there we go to Sukadev, who is speaking to Maharaj Parikshit on the banks of the Ganges, and then Sukadev will tell the story of how Vidura is talking to Maitreya. And so they have these conversations within conversations, even there in the Bhagavatam. But that more or less follows the same kind of authority transmission, disciplic succession transmission. The idea that Brahma spoke to Narada, then Narada spoke to, or Narayana spoke to Brahma, then Brahma spoke to Narada, Narada spoke to Vyasa, and Vyasa spoke to Shukadev, and then Shukadev spoke to Parikshit, and Sutta Goswami was there, and he heard it, and so on. So there's a transmission, a disciplic transmission. But in the Gopala-champu, that's not what's going on. To have this story, there's only one story going on actually in the Gopala-champu, and that's the story of Nanda and Manigriva, who are coming into Nanda Maharaj's house. And the way the story goes is that there's basically two performances. That Snigdhakantha and Madhukantha, the two brothers, twins. One day it's Madhukantha speaks, one day it's Snigdhakantha who speaks. And they're telling the story. And one in the early evening or during the daytime, they'll tell the story to the wider assembly, Nanda Maharaj and the cowherd men, and Krishna's friends and so on. And then in the evening or at night, there'll be a second session where Radha and the gopis and some of the Priya Narma Sakhas, and they'll come and attend. But that second session where the Madhura Rasa is being spoken of course Nanda Maharaj, Mother Yashoda, the elder gopis and gopas, they will not be present there. They're not, they would be embarrassed to come and listen to this particular aspect of Krishna's pastimes. But Nanda, Kubera, and Manigriva, they're going to tell these stories. Now, what is the point here? What is Jiva trying to say? This is what I'm getting at here. In the very beginning, we said that Jiva Goswami's purpose in the Gopala-champu was to present the rasa of Radha and Krishna's pastimes, to present the rasa of Krishna's pastimes, to present the essence of that rasa through kavya, through poetry, through the poetic language, through this language of literature, instead of just simply giving the raw statements from Shastra, the authoritative conclusions of the Bhagavatam and these other Shastras, instead of simply presenting the facts, instead of saying Krishna came back to Vrindavan, he's describing how Krishna came back to Vrindavan. He's trying to explain it in such a way that the person listening will get rasa, will get the feeling of joy and satisfaction and inner bliss that comes from the rasa. So he's presenting it in a particular situation, which is the situation of storytelling, of Nanda Kubera, of Madhukantha and Snigdhakantha telling the story of Radha and Krishna's pastimes. But in that there's a rahasya, in the midst of that situation, in the midst of that scene, there is a particular mystery, a particular secret that's being revealed. And that secret that's being revealed is in the fact that it's a story that they're listening to, that they're attending a performance. Radha and Krishna are hearing about their own activities. They're not actually living those activities anymore, but they're living them vicariously by hearing about them. It's just as if I've lived my life, and then I write my own autobiography, or I write my own story, or somebody else writes about my life, and then I hear him reciting or telling about my life back to me. And he's done it in such a way that my life is so very interesting that even me listening to my own life is like, it brings me a particular kind of pleasure, or a particular kind of joy, or it gives me rasa. So, what Jiva Goswami is trying to say, he says several times, of course, he quotes a verse from the Bhagavatam from Lord Brahma's prayers to Krishna after the Brahma Mohan Lila. He says, Prapancha nishprapanchosi virambayasi bhutale prapanna janatananda sandoham prahitam prabho. That Krishna's Lila, Krishna has the Nitya Lila. Krishna is nishprapancha. Krishna has a nitya vihar. Krishna has a nitya pastime in the spiritual world. He's nishprapancha. Prapancha nishprapanchosi virambayasi bhutale. So by engaging in pastimes within the material world, Krishna bewilders the people who are here. He bewilders everyone in this world who thinks that Krishna is somehow or other subjected to time and subjected to material conditions. So, but he does so in order to give joy to the surrendered souls. Prapanna janatananda santoham pratitam prabhu. Or elsewhere at the end of the Rasa Lila also Krishna says, or Shukadeva says, that Anugrahaya bhutana manushim tanumasritam. That in order to give mercy to all the devotees, or to all the living beings, Krishna appears as a human being, which, upon hearing, one becomes tantat paro bhavet. One becomes, on hearing those pastimes, one becomes attached to Krishna, one develops love for Krishna. But here there's something again that's a bit different. Here it's Krishna himself who is enjoying his own pastimes. It's Radha and Krishna themselves who are enjoying their own pastimes. So, what's really is that Radha and Krishna have experienced separation in the material world, but when they hear about it, they get the rasa from that pastime. When they get the rasa, they're experiencing it, and even they will experience the suffering, but they experience it as rasa. They don't experience it as direct experience. And that's something that I'll have to explain in the next class.